The winter wind howled through the Sacramento mountains like a wounded animal, rattling the wooden shutters of Ben Whitehorse's cabin. Ice crystals formed on the window panes, creating patterns that resembled frozen tears. Outside, the coyotes called to each other across the vast expanse of snow-covered pine forests, their voices carrying a loneliness that matched the landscape. Ben sat by the dying fire, his weathered hands working a piece of leather into a new bridle. The flickering light cast shadows across his Apache features, highlighting the lines that 28 winters had carved into his face. He had chosen this isolation 5 years ago, after the incident at Fort Humboldt that left 3 men dead and his name spoken only in whispers. The mountains didn't judge. They simply existed, cold and indifferent, asking nothing of him but survival. The knock came so softly at first that he thought it was merely another branch hitting the door. But it came again, weaker this time, barely audible above the wind. Ben's hand moved instinctively to the Winchester propped against the wall. Nobody came up this mountain in winter. Nobody who meant well. Anyway, he approached the door slowly, rifle ready. "Who's there?" No answer came. Just another feeble knock that sounded more like a plea than a demand. Ben lifted the heavy wooden bar and cracked the door open, the barrel of his rifle leading the way. What he saw made him lower the weapon. A woman stood swaying in the doorway, more ghost than flesh. Her dress, once blue perhaps, hung in tatters around her thin frame. No coat protected her from the bitter cold, and her feet were wrapped in bloody rags instead of proper boots. Ice crystals clung to her dark hair, and her lips had turned the color of twilight. But it was her eyes that struck him most, green as spring grass, holding a desperate kind of hope that flickered like a candle in the wind. "Please," she whispered, and then she collapsed forward. Ben caught her before she hit the floor, his rifle clattering forgotten against the doorframe. She weighed no more than a child, all bones and determination. He kicked the door shut with his foot and carried her to the fire, laying her on the bearskin rug that served as his only luxury. "Water," she mumbled through cracked lips. He fetched a cup, supporting her head as she drank. Her hands shook so badly that water spilled down her chin. In the firelight, he could see the bruises, purple and yellow marks circling her wrists like shackles, a fading handprint on her throat, cuts that spoke of ropes and struggles. "Easy now," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "You're safe." She looked at him then, really looked, and something passed between them that he couldn't name. Recognition. That wasn't possible. He'd never seen her before, but there was something familiar about her face, like an echo of a dream he couldn't quite recall. "My name's Kate," she said when she'd drunk her fill. "Kate McKenna. I just need a corner to rest in, some food if you can spare it. I won't be any trouble. I promise." Ben studied her carefully. Every survival instinct he'd honed in these mountains screamed at him to send her away. People meant complications. People meant the past catching up. But those eyes, and the way she held herself despite her condition, proud even in her desperation. "When's the last time you ate?" 3 days, maybe 4. Hard to keep track when you're running." He moved to his stores, pulling out dried venison, hardtack, and a precious can of peaches he'd been saving. She fell upon the food like a starving wolf, then caught herself, slowing down, trying to show manners that seemed almost absurd given her state. "Running from what?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. A woman alone, marked up like that. Clothes torn just so. The story wrote itself in the violent script of the frontier. She paused, a piece of meat halfway to her mouth. "From men who thought they owned me. From a place that was supposed to be work but became a prison. From—" She shuddered. "I got away. That's what matters." Ben nodded, not pressing. He understood the weight of secrets, the need to parse out truth in small doses. He built up the fire and fetched a blanket from his bed, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll take the floor." "I couldn't." "You will. No arguments." She looked like she might protest further, but exhaustion won. He helped her to the narrow cot in the corner, turning away as she struggled out of her ruined dress and into one of his shirts that hung on her like a tent. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as she settled under the covers. "You don't know me. I could be trouble. I probably am trouble." Ben considered the question, stoking the fire unnecessarily. "My mother used to say that the mountain tests us not by the storms we weather, but by the strangers we shelter." Was she Apache? He glanced at her, surprised. Most people couldn't tell, or didn't care to see past the general category of half-breed. "Yes, my father was Irish. Bad combination in most towns. Good combination for kindness. Seems like..." He didn't answer, unsettled by the observation. As she drifted towards sleep, he heard her whisper, "They'll come looking. They always do." "Let them come," he said quietly. But she was already asleep. Ben returned to his chair by the fire, but sleep eluded him. He watched the woman, Kate, as she tossed and turned, whimpering occasionally from dreams he could only imagine. The wind continued its assault on the cabin, and somewhere in that wind, he could swear he heard his mother's voice, the way she used to speak in his dreams since her passing 2 winters ago. "She is the one, Benjamin, the one who will change everything." He'd had the dream 3 nights running before Kate appeared, his mother standing by a river of stars, pointing to a face he couldn't quite see. Now, watching the firelight play across Kate's features, he understood. It was her face his mother had shown him, the rational part of him, the part that had kept him alive through wars both personal and public. Rejected such thinking. Dreams were dreams, nothing more. But the blood of his mother's people ran strong in him, and they had always known that some truths came in forms the white world couldn't measure or weigh. Kate cried out in her sleep, and he moved to her side, placing a cool cloth on her fevered forehead. Up close, he could see more marks, scars both old and new, telling a story of survival that went back longer than just 3 days of running. Her hands, when they clutched at the blanket, showed the calluses of hard work, but also rope burns across the palms. "Shh," he whispered, the way his mother used to calm him during childhood nightmares. "You're safe now." She quieted at his voice, her breathing becoming more regular. He returned to his vigil by the fire, rifle across his lap now, ears attuned to any sound beyond the familiar symphony of the winter night. If trouble was following her, it would find him ready. The hours passed slowly, marked by the shifting of logs in the fire and the gradual lightening of the sky beyond the frosted windows. As dawn approached, Kate stirred, sitting up with a start that spoke of too many dangerous awakenings. "It's all right," Ben said from his chair. "Just morning coming on." She blinked at him, then at her surroundings, as if surprised to find herself somewhere warm and safe. "You stayed up all night." "Habit." "Watching for them." "Watching." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "I need to tell you what you're risking by helping me. The men I ran from, they're not just common criminals. They're connected, protected. They run a business." Her voice caught on the word. "I figured as much. Young women, girls, some of them, promised work as domestics or seamstresses. But when we arrived..." She couldn't continue, but she didn't need to. Ben had lived long enough in the shadows of civilization to know how such stories went. "How did you get away?" "The man guarding us got drunk, passed out. I used a hairpin on the lock skill I learned from my mother, God rest her. She always said a woman should know how to free herself." Kate's smile was bitter. "I was the only one who ran. The others were too scared or too broken. I left them there." The guilt in her voice was raw, bleeding through despite her attempt at matter-of-fact delivery. "You survived," Ben said. "That's not a sin." "Isn't it?" She looked at him with those green eyes that seemed to hold forests of sorrow. "When I sleep, I hear them crying. When I wake, I wonder if they're still alive. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving the world muffled in snow and possibility. Ben made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours before. "Where were you headed before you knocked on my door?" "My mother's place, little homestead about 2 days north of here. If she's still there, I need to see her. Need to tell her I'm alive." Ben calculated distances, risks, supplies. Everything in him said to stay hidden, stay safe, but those eyes, and his mother's voice in the dream, and something else, maybe just the weight of 5 years of running from his own ghosts. "We'll go together," he heard himself say. "Soon as you're strong enough, safer with two." Kate stared at him. "You don't even know me. Why would you?" "Because," Ben said, standing and moving to check the window. "Sometimes a man gets tired of letting the world's cruelty have the last word." The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow as they descended from Ben's mountain refuge. Kate wore his spare coat, still too large but better than the tatters she'd arrived in. He'd fashioned her makeshift boots from deer hide and rope, adequate for the journey if she was careful. She walked beside his horse, insisting she was strong enough despite the tremor in her legs. "Your mother's place," Ben said, guiding them through a narrow pass between granite cliffs. "What name should I be asking after if we need directions?" "Margaret McKenna." Everyone called her Maggie. Kate's voice warmed at the memory. "She has red hair going gray, laughs like a crow, and makes the best cornbread this side of the Missouri." They traveled in companionable silence through forests of pine and fir, the snow muffling their passage. Ben kept his rifle ready, eyes scanning for trouble that might wear 2 legs or 4. Kate proved tougher than her appearance suggested, matching his pace without complaint, even when he could see the exhaustion pulling at her features. By midday, they stopped at a frozen creek. Ben broke through the ice to water his horse while Kate sat on a fallen log, her face turned to the weak winter sun. "I haven't thanked you properly," she said. "No need." "There is, though." She looked at him directly, that forthright gaze that kept unsettling him. "Most men would have turned me away, or worse, would have expected payment for their kindness." Ben busied himself with the horse's bridle. "I'm not most men." "No," she agreed softly. "You're not." They pushed on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing from high mountain wilderness to the gentler slopes that led to the valley settlements. As they neared civilization, Ben noticed Kate growing more tense, her eyes darting at every sound. "The homestead's just past Willow Creek," she said as evening approached. "Maybe another hour." But when they finally crested the hill overlooking her childhood home, Kate's sharp intake of breath told him everything. The small cabin sat dark and cold. No smoke rising from the chimney despite the freezing temperature. The garden gate hung open, banging softly in the wind. Snow had drifted across the porch, undisturbed by footprints. Kate broke away from him, running despite her weakness, calling, "Mama, Mama!" Her voice cracked and echoed across the empty yard. Ben followed more slowly, leading his horse, already knowing what they would find. The cabin door was unlocked. Inside, dust covered surfaces that had once gleamed with care. A rocking chair sat still by the cold fireplace, knitting needles and a half-finished shawl abandoned on the seat. The bedroom held a narrow bed, carefully made, as if waiting for someone who would never return. Kate stood in the middle of the main room, turning in slow circles, taking in the absence. She always kept the fire going. Even in summer, she'd have coals banked for morning coffee. Ben found tinderbox and kindling, working to bring warmth back to the dead hearth. As the flames caught, Kate discovered a letter on the mantel, her name written across it in shaky script. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "My dearest Katie," she read aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "If you're reading this, Then my prayers have been answered and you've come home. I'm going to stay with the Walkers. The sickness has got into my chest, and Martha Walker has experience with such things. Don't blame yourself, my girl. Just come find me. All my love, Mama. The Walker place? Ben asked. 2 miles east. Good people. They have a dairy farm. Hope flickered in her eyes again. She might still be... But Ben had seen the date on the letter. 3 months old. He said nothing, helping Kate back to his horse. The ride to the Walker farm passed in tense silence, Kate's fingers clutching the letter like a talisman. They smelled the smoke from the Walker chimney before they saw the house. A welcome sign of life. But as they approached, Ben noticed the black ribbon tied to the porch post, the universal symbol of mourning. Kate saw it too, her body going rigid against him. Martha Walker answered their knock, a plump woman with kind eyes that widened in recognition. Katie McKenna, Lord in heaven. Is that really you? Mrs. Walker, my mother. The older woman's face crumpled. Oh, child, come in out of the cold. They sat by the Walker fireplace, cups of hot cider warming their hands. As Martha told the story, Margaret McKenna had fought the lung sickness for 2 months, never giving up hope that her daughter would return. She talked about you every day, Martha said, tears running down her cheeks. Said you'd gone to Sacramento for work, that you'd be back soon. Even at the end, she kept saying, my Katie's strong, she'll come home. Kate stared into her cider, dry-eyed now, as if she'd moved beyond tears into some deeper place of grief. When 6 weeks passed, we buried her in the church cemetery, next to your father. The preacher said nice words. Half the valley came to pay respects. Was it peaceful? Martha reached over to squeeze Kate's hand. Peaceful as anyone could hope. She went in her sleep, your name on her lips. They stayed for supper, Martha fussing over Kate like a mother hen. But Ben could see the guilt eating at her from inside. Each kindness from the Walkers seemed to cut deeper than cruelty would have. When Martha offered them lodging for the night, Kate declined. We'll stay at Mama's place, she said. I need to be there. Back at the cold cabin, Ben built up the fire while Kate walked through the rooms like a ghost haunting her own past. She touched objects, her mother's hairbrush, a faded daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, the shawl still waiting to be finished. She was all I had left, Kate said finally, sinking into the rocking chair. Papa died when I was 12. Mining accident. Mama held on, kept this place going with her sewing and washing. I was supposed to help, supposed to go to the city, make good money, send it home. Instead, you survived something terrible, Ben said firmly. That letter, she never gave up hope. She knew you were alive, fighting to come back. Kate looked up at him, and the raw pain in her eyes made him want to look away. But he didn't. I was 3 days from here. 3 days. If I'd left earlier. If I'd fought harder. Blame is a knife, Ben said, the words coming from some deep place of his own pain. Turn it on yourself and you bleed for nothing. Your mother wouldn't want that. What would you know about it? The anger came suddenly, hot and cleansing. You sit up on your mountain, hiding from the world, and you presume to tell me about blame. Ben took the hit without flinching. She was right, after all. I know that I killed 3 men who deserved killing, and it cost me everything. Home, family, future. I know that blame nearly ate me alive before I learned to set it down. Not forget, never forget, but set it down so I could keep walking. Kate's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. I'm sorry, I have no right. You have every right. Grief makes us cruel sometimes. It's human. She laughed bitterly. Human? I haven't felt human in months. Those men, that place, they tried to make us into something else. Something less. And now Mama's gone. And those bastards are still out there, still stealing girls. Still... She stopped, pressing her fists against her eyes. What was the name? Ben asked quietly. The man who ran it. Kate looked up sharply. Why? Just tell me. Josiah Caraway owns half the businesses in Cedar Ridge. Hotel, saloon, freight company. All of it just cover for his real trade. She laughed again. No humor in it. Pillar of the community. They call him. Goes to church every Sunday. Drops gold coins in the collection plate. Ben filed the name away. He knew the type, men who wore respectability like armor while dealing in human misery. The frontier was full of them, thriving in the spaces where law was thin and money spoke loudest. He'll pay, Kate said suddenly, fiercely. I'll make him pay for what he's done. For Mama, for those girls still trapped, for... That's tomorrow's problem. Ben interrupted gently. Tonight, you grieve. Tonight, you rest. Justice keeps better than vengeance. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. They prepared for sleep. Kate taking her childhood bed while Ben made a pallet by the fire, but neither slept well. Kate's muffled sobs carried through the thin walls, while Ben lay awake planning routes and contingencies, knowing that their path had irreversibly changed. In his half-dreams, his mother's voice came again. The broken ones heal each other, Benjamin, but first they must choose to stand together against the storm. When dawn came, pale and cold through the frost-covered windows, Kate emerged with red eyes but steady hands. She wore her mother's good dress, altered to fit, and had braided her hair in a style that made her look older, more formidable. I'm going to burn that place to the ground, she announced calmly, as if discussing the weather. Free every girl, see Caraway hanged or shot, and salt the earth where it stood. Will you help me? Ben looked at her, really looked. Not the broken bird who'd collapsed at his door, but a woman forged in grief and rage into something harder and more dangerous. He thought of his comfortable isolation, his careful existence outside the world's notice. Then he thought of his mother's words, of debts owed to the universe, of the simple fact that some things were worth the risk of stepping back into the light. I'll help, he said simply. But we do it smart, we do it right, and we make sure that when Caraway falls, he takes his whole rotten network with him. Kate extended her hand, and he shook it, sealing a partnership born of loss and aimed at justice. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered valley ablaze with light. The abandoned warehouse sat on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge like a cancer, its weathered boards gray with age and neglect. Kate's hands shook as she pointed to the faded advertisement still tacked to a post nearby. Young ladies wanted, respectable employment, good wages. Apply within. That's how they caught me, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Promise of honest work in a dress shop. $20 a month plus room and board. More than Mama made in 3 months of washing. Ben studied the building from their concealment behind a stand of cottonwoods. 3 stories, few windows, only 2 visible doors, built like a fortress disguised as commerce. His soldier's eye caught the worn path leading to a side entrance, the fresh wheel ruts in the mud, the way the curtains in the upper windows never seemed to move. How many girls when you were there? He asked. 12, maybe 15. They kept us separated mostly. Easier to control. Kate's jaw tightened. Some had been there for years. Some were barely old enough to braid their own hair. They'd spent 3 days preparing, gathering information carefully. Ben had gone into town alone, his Apache features less noticeable than Kate's distinctive red-touched hair that marked her as Maggie McKenna's daughter. He'd drunk watered whiskey in saloons, listened to cowboys brag, learned that Caraway was indeed preparing another shipment south. Every 2 months, a drunk freighter had told him. Like clockwork, boss has buyers waiting in San Antonio, Tucson, even down in Mexico. Quality merchandise, he calls it. Now, watching the warehouse, Ben felt the old familiar coldness settle over him, the same feeling he'd had before battle, when survival meant thinking 3 moves ahead and showing no mercy. There, Kate whispered, gripping his arm. That's one of his men, Samuel Hicks. He was the main guard. A thick-set man emerged from the side door, stretching in the afternoon sun, even from a distance. Ben could see the pistol at his hip, the casual arrogance in his stance. Hicks spat tobacco juice and went back inside. They retreated to Kate's mother's cabin to plan. She'd remembered more details, the layout of the interior, the routine of the guards, the way Carraway himself came by every few days to inspect his inventory. The information came in painful fragments, each memory fighting its way past the walls she'd built to survive. There's a root cellar, she said suddenly one evening. They kept the troublesome ones there. No light, barely any air. I spent 3 days down there after my first escape attempt. Ben's hand stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. How many guards at night? 2 inside, 1 walking the perimeter. Sometimes Carraway brings others, buyers. I think they'd come at night, look us over like cattle. Her voice went flat, empty. Some girls left with them. We never saw them again. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Ben had gone to town for supplies when he overheard 2 women talking outside the general store. Another family's girl gone missing, one said, clutching her basket. The Jeffersons' eldest went to town last week for fabric. Never came home. 3rd one this year, the other replied, lowering her voice. You don't suppose... Hush! You know better than to speak against Mr. Carraway. The sheriff's his cousin, after all. Ben purchased his goods and left, but the conversation stayed with him. That evening, he found Kate mending one of her mother's dresses by lamplight. It's still happening, he said without preamble. Another girl missing? Kate's needle stopped mid-stitch. Of course it is. It never stopped. Why would it? She set down her sewing, standing to pace the small room. Every day we wait, every day we plan and prepare, is another day some girl spends in that hell. Rushing in gets us killed and helps no one. Then, what do you suggest? She whirled on him, eyes blazing. Write a strongly worded letter to the sheriff, appeal to the mayor who takes Carraway's bribes, wait for divine intervention. We need proof, Ben said calmly. Something that can't be ignored or buried. And we need allies. Allies. Kate laughed bitterly. Who's going to stand with an Apache half-breed and a runaway whore against the richest man in the county? Ben flinched at her self-description but didn't argue. He knew the weight of the words the world would use against them. Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper where he'd been making notes. The preacher, Reverend Whitcomb, he spoke at your mother's funeral. Martha said, what kind of man is he? Kate considered. Good, I think Mama respected him. He runs a temperance society, speaks against the saloons. She paused. His own daughter died young. Consumption, Mama said, but there were whispers. What kind of whispers? That she'd been compromised, that the sickness was just what they told people. Ben nodded slowly. A man who'd lost a daughter might be willing to listen, might even be willing to act. We start there. They found Reverend Whitcomb in his small church the next day, preparing his Sunday sermon. He was a thin man with gentle eyes that sharpened considerably when Kate told her story. He listened without interruption, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his Bible. I've suspected, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Dear Lord, I have suspected but couldn't prove. There have been so many girls over the years. Always the same story. Left for work, disappeared. Family too poor or too frightened to push for answers. Will you help us? Kate asked. The Reverend stood, moving to the window that overlooked the town. Carraway owns half the businesses, employs a quarter of the men. His money built the new school, keeps the sheriff's office running, fighting him. He turned back to them. It would take something undeniable. Witnesses, evidence that even his bought judges couldn't dismiss. Then we'll get it, Ben said. That night, they watched the warehouse again. This time, they saw what they'd feared. A covered wagon arriving after midnight. Two young figures pushed roughly from the back. Even from a distance, they could hear crying. "That's Amy Jefferson," Kate breathed. "I know her. She's 15, maybe 16. The other—" She squinted in the darkness. "God, that's the Platt girl. She can't be more than 13. Ben had to physically hold Kate back from charging forward. "Not yet," he hissed. "We need to know the full operation. Where they're kept. How many guards. When the next shipment—" "They're children. And we'll save them. All of them. But not by getting ourselves killed tonight." They followed the wagon at a distance as it headed not to the main warehouse, but to a smaller building nearby. One that from the outside looked like a defunct grain storage facility. More guards here. Ben counted at least 4. The girls were hustled inside, and the doors barred behind them. "A second location," Kate said, her tactical mind working despite her emotion. "They must use it for new arrivals. Processing." She spat the word like poison. They returned to the cabin as dawn approached, both exhausted but too wired to sleep. Kate made coffee while Ben sketched out what they'd seen, adding to their growing map of Carraway's operation. "We need inside information," he said finally. "Guard rotations, exact numbers, where they keep the keys." "I could go back," Kate said quietly. Ben's head snapped up. "No." "Listen, I could let myself be caught. Gather information." "No." His voice was harder now. "That's not happening." "It's the logical." Ben slammed his hand on the table, making them both jump. "I said no. We find another way." Kate stared at him, something shifting in her expression. "Why do you care so much you barely know me?" He couldn't explain about the dreams, about his mother's voice, about the way looking at her felt like recognition rather than discovery. Instead, he said, "Because I've seen enough people broken by this world, I won't watch it happen again if I can stop it." They sat in silence as the coffee cooled between them. Finally, Kate spoke. "There might be another way. When I was there, one of the guards' younger fellow named Pete Morrison, he seemed uncomfortable with it all. Never hurt any of us. Looked sick when the others got rough. If we could turn him—" It was thin, but it was something. They spent the rest of the day planning how to approach Morrison without alerting the others. By evening, they had the beginnings of a strategy. As night fell, Kate stood by her mother's grave in the small cemetery behind the church. Ben waited at a respectful distance as she spoke quietly to the stone marker. "I'm going to finish this, Mama, for you, for those girls, for all the ones who never made it home." She pressed her hand to the cold earth. "Watch over me. I'm going to need all the help I can get." Walking back, she slipped her hand into Ben's. "Whatever happens, thank you for believing me, for standing with me." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Whatever happens," he agreed. Above them, stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, each one a cold point of light in the vast indifference of the universe. But here, in this moment, 2 broken people had found common cause, and that was its own kind of light against the darkness. Tomorrow, they would begin in earnest. Tonight, they prepared for war. The freight wagons rolled south at dawn. 6 covered carriages guarded by armed riders. Ben and Kate watched from a ridge overlooking the desert trail, her field glasses trained on the convoy. Even from this distance, they could hear it, soft crying from within the canvas-covered beds, quickly hushed by harsh voices. 20 guards, Ben counted. 4 to a wagon, 4 outriders. They're not taking chances. Kate lowered the glasses, her face pale but determined. "I recognize the lead rider, Tom Briggs. He was one of the cruelest." She pointed to the 3rd wagon. "That one's riding lower than the others. More girls inside." They'd been tracking Carraway's operation for 2 weeks now, gathering evidence, building their case. Pete Morrison, the young guard Kate had remembered, proved easier to turn than expected. They'd cornered him outside a saloon, drunk and miserable, carrying guilt like stones in his pockets. "I never wanted this job." He'd sobbed into his whiskey. "My wife's sick, needed the money, but those girls, some younger than my own daughter." He'd given them names, schedules, routes. Most importantly, he'd confirmed what Kate suspected. Caraway kept meticulous records. Bills of sale, buyer information, even photographs, insurance. Morrison called it, case any of his partners tried to cheat him. Now, watching the convoy disappear into the heat shimmer, Kate turned to Ben. "The ledgers are in his office safe. Morrison says he locks them up every night before heading home." "Then that's our target," Ben said. "Those records could hang him and every bastard who's bought from him." They rode hard back to Cedar Ridge. Arriving as the sun reached its zenith, the town dozed in the afternoon heat. Shops closed for the midday break. Perfect timing for what they planned. Reverend Whitcomb met them in the church vestry, along with two others. James Cooper, the blacksmith whose niece had vanished 2 years prior, and Martha Walker, who'd cared for Kate's mother. Small numbers, but Ben had learned that righteous anger could multiply force like nothing else. "Morrison's willing to testify," Kate told them, "but we need those records. Without them, it's our word against Caraway's gold." Cooper, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, cracked his knuckles. "Just tell me when. I've been waiting 2 years for this chance." "Tonight," Ben said. "While the convoy's away, security will be lighter. We go in fast, get the records, get out. No heroics, no vengeance, just evidence." Martha shook her head. "What about the girls still trapped? We can't just leave them." "One thing at a time," Kate said, though Ben could see how much it cost her. "We save them by destroying the system, not by getting killed in a rescue attempt." As darkness fell, their small band gathered in the alley behind Caraway's Freight and Trade. Morrison had provided a detailed layout office on the second floor, safe behind a painting of President Grant. 2 guards on night duty. Ben went first, moving with the silence his Apache mother had taught him. The back door lock yielded to Kate's hairpin skills, and they slipped inside. The warehouse floor stretched before them, crates and barrels providing cover. Above, lamplight showed through the office windows. They'd made it halfway to the stairs when they heard it. Footsteps on the floor above. Too many for just 2 guards. Ben held up a hand. Listening, 4, maybe 5 men. They'd walked into a trap, or worse timing than Morrison had known. "Back," he whispered, but it was too late. The door they'd entered burst open, armed men pouring in. "Well, well," came a cultured voice from the stairs. Josiah Caraway himself descended, dressed in an expensive suit despite the hour, silver watch chain glinting. "Miss McKenna, I heard rumors you were still alive. Couldn't quite believe it. You were always so fragile." Kate stepped into the light, chin raised. Not fragile enough, apparently. Caraway smiled, the expression never reaching his cold gray eyes. "No matter. You've saved me the trouble of hunting you down. Bad for business, having escapees running around talking. Your business is finished." Kate said, "People know. The Reverend, the sheriff in Sacramento. Newspapers." "My dear girl," Caraway interrupted. "Do you think you're the first to try I own this town? The sheriff's my cousin. The judge owes me money, and anyone who speaks against me tends to have accidents." He gestured to his men. "Take them." That's when Ben struck. He'd been edging toward a stack of grain sacks, and now he kicked them over, sending 100-pound bags tumbling into the guards. In the confusion, Cooper charged from behind a crate, his blacksmith's hammer swinging. "Run!" Ben shouted, drawing his pistol. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Kate didn't run. Instead, she darted toward the stairs, toward Caraway. Ben saw her plan instantly. Without the records, they had nothing. He laid down covering fire as she raced up the steps. Caraway retreated to his office. Slamming the door, Kate hit it with her shoulder. bouncing off. Behind her! Ben heard Cooper cry out, saw him fall, clutching his arm. Martha dragged him behind cover as bullets splintered the wood around them. The window! Morrison appeared at Kate's side. He'd been hidden in the office all along. Insurance of his own. Together they kicked in the door to find Carraway frantically loading documents into a metal box. "You're too late," he snarled. "Even if you take these, I have copies. I have friends. You'll hang for this. All of you." Kate smiled then. A terrible expression. "Maybe, but you'll hang first." She lunged for the box. Carraway drew a derringer from his vest, but Morrison was faster, tackling his employer. The gun went off, the shot going wide, and Kate seized the metal box. "Jump!" Ben called from below. He'd overturned a wagon full of hay beneath the window. Without hesitation, Kate leaped, clutching the box to her chest. She hit the hay hard but rolled to her feet. More gunfire, more shouting. Cooper was on his feet again, arm bloody but hammer still swinging. Martha had found a rifle somewhere and was holding the main door, but they were outnumbered, and more guards were coming. "This way!" Reverend Whitcomb appeared in a side door they hadn't known existed, gesturing frantically. They ran, Ben half carrying Kate, who'd twisted her ankle in the fall, behind them. Carraway screamed orders, promising rewards for their capture. They scattered into the night. Cooper and Martha one way, Morrison another, the Reverend disappearing into his church. Ben and Kate made for the livery stable where they'd left horses saddled and ready. As they rode hard into the darkness, the box secured in Kate's saddlebags, she looked back at the lights of Cedar Ridge. "It's not over." "No," Ben agreed. "Now it really begins." They rode through the night, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. By dawn, they'd reached the cabin where they could finally examine their prize. Kate's hands shook as she opened the box, revealing exactly what Morrison had promised. Ledgers, contracts, letters, names, dates, amounts paid. A complete record of human trafficking dating back 8 years. "Look at this," Kate breathed, holding up a letter. "The territorial governor's own secretary. Bought 2 girls last summer." Page after page of damnation. Judges, businessmen, army officers. The web of corruption spread far beyond Cedar Ridge, beyond even California. They had enough to destroy dozens of powerful men. "We need to get this to someone who can't be bought." Ben said, "Federal marshals, maybe, or straight to Washington." Kate was staring at one particular entry, her face white. June 15th, Sarah Morrison. Age 14, sold to private buyer. Mexico City, $500. Morrison's daughter. She nodded. "He said she ran away. He's been working for the man who sold his own child." They spent the day copying crucial pages, preparing multiple packets of evidence. If Carraway tried to intercept one, others would get through. As they worked, Kate suddenly reached over and took Ben's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said. In case we don't get another chance. These weeks with you, fighting this fight, it's the first time since they took me that I've felt human again. Felt like myself." Ben turned her hand over, tracing the calluses and scars. "You saved me too, from the mountain, from myself. My mother was right." "About what?" He told her then about the dreams, his mother's voice, the certainty he'd felt when Kate appeared at his door. She listened without skepticism, understanding that some truths couldn't be measured or weighed. "Maybe we were meant to find each other," she said softly. "Maybe some good can come from all this evil." A rider approaching fast broke the moment. Ben reached for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized Morrison. The man nearly fell from his horse, face flushed with exertion and panic. "They've taken more girls," he gasped. "Right off the streets. The Jefferson girl, the Platt girl. Carraway's moving them tonight. Says he's closing shop, heading to Mexico with whatever inventory he can transport." Kate stood slowly. "How many guards?" "Everything he's got. 20, 30 men. He knows you have the records. He's desperate. Good, Kate said, and the smile that crossed her face made Morrison step back. Desperate men make mistakes. She looked at Ben. We can't let him take those girls. Records or no records. Ben nodded. He'd known it would come to this, a choice between justice and immediate action. But looking at Kate, seeing the fire in her eyes that had replaced the broken emptiness, he knew there was really no choice at all. Then we stop him, he said simply. Tonight we end this. Morrison swallowed hard. The whole town's talking about what happened. Some are saying it's about time someone stood up to Caraway. You might have more help than you think. As if to confirm his words, they heard horses approaching. Cooper appeared, arm in a sling but determination intact. Behind him rode others, men and women Ben recognized from town, faces hard with resolve. The blacksmith grinned fiercely. Thought you might need some help. Turns out Caraway's made more enemies than friends over the years. Soon as word spread about what you found, folks started choosing sides. Kate looked around at their growing band of allies, then at Ben. For the girls, she said. For all of them, he replied, past and future both. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, they made their plans. One way or another, Josiah Caraway's reign of terror would end tonight. The morning frost clung to the sagebrush as 23 riders approached the canyon hideout. Ben led them through the narrow pass he'd scouted at dawn. Kate beside him, her mother's pistol holstered at her hip. Behind them rode Cooper and his hammermen from the forge, the widow Hutchins and her 3 sons, Morrison pale but determined, and over a dozen others whose families had been torn apart by Caraway's trade. There, Ben pointed to the old mining camp nestled against the canyon wall. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, and they could see wagons being loaded in the yard. Morrison was right. He's preparing to run. Kate studied the scene through field glasses. I count 15 guards visible. Could be more inside. She lowered the glasses, jaw tight. The main building, that's where they'll have the girls. Stone construction. One main entrance. Few windows. Like a fortress. Cooper spat tobacco juice. Fortresses fall. Just takes the right pressure in the right place. They dismounted well out of sight, gathering around Ben as he sketched the camp layout in the dirt. We need to hit fast and hard before they can barricade. Cooper, take your men around the east ridge. When you hear shooting, come in from that side. Widow Hutchins, your boys are our sharpshooters. Take position on the south cliff. What about the girls? Martha Walker asked. She'd insisted on coming despite protests. Medical supplies in her saddlebags. If fighting starts, Caraway might. He won't hurt them, Kate said firmly. They're his prophet. Without them, he's just another fugitive. She looked at Ben. But we need someone inside before the shooting starts. Someone to protect them. Morrison stepped forward. I'll go. They still think I'm loyal. I can get inside. Be ready to secure the girls when you attack. Ben studied the man, weighing fear against determination in his hollow eyes. You sure? My daughter's name is in those ledgers. Morrison said simply, I helped sell her. This won't bring her back, but maybe it helps balance the scales. They gave him 30 minutes. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the frost, revealing the stark beauty of the canyon. Kate checked her pistol one more time, then surprised Ben by catching his hand. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I want you to know, you gave me back myself. After everything they took, you helped me remember who I am. Kate. No, let me say it. Her green eyes were fierce and soft at once. If we don't both make it through this, we will. He squeezed her fingers. Both of us. We have too much work left to do. A shout from the camp cut short her reply. Morrison had been discovered, or betrayed himself. Either way, their timeline had just accelerated. Ben whistled sharp and high, the signal to move. They rode hard down the slope, dust billowing, guns drawn. The camp erupted in confusion as guards scrambled for positions. Ben saw Morrison struggling with two men near the main building's door. He'd made it that far at least. The first shots rang out from the Hutchins boys on the cliff, precise and deadly. Two guards spun and fell. Then Cooper's group smashed into the eastern perimeter, the blacksmith's hammer crushing a man's rifle before he could aim. "The door!" Kate shouted, spurring her horse toward where Morrison was losing his fight. Ben followed, firing from the saddle. Watching guards scatter for cover, they leaped from their horses at full gallop. Kate shot one of Morrison's attackers while Ben tackled the other. Morrison, blood streaming from his nose, fumbled for the door. "They're in the cellar," he gasped. 20 girls, maybe more. Caraway's down there with them." The door exploded outward, Caraway himself emerging with a shotgun. Ben shoved Kate aside as buckshot tore the air where she'd been standing. Before Caraway could reload, she rolled and came up firing. The shotgun flew from his hands. "You hellcat!" Caraway snarled, drawing a Navy Colt. "Should have killed you proper the first time." His shot went wide as Ben's fist connected with his jaw. The two men grappled, rolling in the dust. Caraway was heavier, but Ben was younger and fueled by rage. They crashed into a water barrel, splintering wood, fighting for control of the pistol. Kate rushed into the building, Morrison limping behind. The cellar stairs were where he'd said, a heavy door standing open. From below came crying, pleading voices. "It's all right," Kate called down. "We're here to help stay calm." She descended into lamp-lit hell. 23 young women huddled in the stone cellar, chains on their ankles, terror in their eyes. Some she recognized. Amy Jefferson, the Platt girl, others from missing posters. Some were strangers, grabbed from other towns, other lives. "Kate," Amy Jefferson's voice cracked. "Kate McKenna, but you got away. And now you will too." Kate's hands shook as she examined the chains. "Morrison, the keys." "Caraway has them," Morrison called from above. "On his belt." Outside, the battle raged. Cooper's hammer had claimed 3 more guards, but he was down, clutching a bullet wound in his thigh. The Hutchins boys kept deadly fire from above, but ammunition was running low. Martha Walker dragged wounded to cover, working frantically to stop bleeding. Ben and Caraway rolled across the yard, both bloodied, neither yielding. The pistol had been lost in their struggle, making it a contest of fists and fury. Caraway grabbed a broken board, swinging it at Ben's head. Ben ducked, came up inside the arc, and drove his knee into Caraway's stomach. The older man doubled over, gasping. Ben seized the moment, fingers finding the keyring on Caraway's belt. He yanked it free just as Caraway pulled a hidden knife from his boot. "Savage," Caraway wheezed, lunging. "Think you can destroy what I've built? I have friends, influence." Ben sidestepped, using Caraway's momentum against him. The knife meant for Ben's heart found only air, and Ben's return strike sent Caraway sprawling. "Your friends will abandon you," Ben said, standing over the fallen man. "Your influence is worthless now. Those ledgers will see you hang." Inside, Kate worked frantically with the keys Morrison had retrieved from Ben. One by one, chains fell away. Girls clung to each other, to her, sobbing with relief and residual fear. "Can you walk?" Kate asked them. "We need to move quickly." Kate Morrison's warning came just as a guard appeared on the stairs, rifle raised. Without thinking, Kate drew and fired. Months of Ben's teaching making the motion smooth as silk. The guard tumbled down the steps. "Everyone out," Kate herded the girls up the stairs. "Stay low, stay together." They emerged into a battlefield winding down. Most of Caraway's men had fled or fallen. The Hutchins boys were climbing down from their perch. Cooper was sitting up despite his wound. And Ben. Ben stood in the center of the yard, Caraway kneeling before him, the man's own knife pressed to his throat. "No," Kate said, approaching slowly. That's not justice. That's what he would do. Ben's hand trembled with the effort of restraint. This man had caused so much suffering, destroyed so many lives. One quick motion would end it. Ben, Kate's voice was gentle but firm. We're better than him. We have to be. Slowly, Ben lowered the knife. Caraway sagged forward, defeat written in every line of his body. Around them, townspeople were arriving. Word had spread, and Cedar Ridge was choosing its side. Reverend Whitcomb rode in with the federal marshal they'd telegraphed from Sacramento, the lawman's badge glinting in the morning sun. Behind them came more riders, families looking for lost daughters, journalists drawn by the story, citizens ready to reclaim their town. Josiah Caraway, the marshal announced. You're under arrest for kidnapping, human trafficking, and conspiracy. These good people have provided enough evidence to hang you 3 times over. As they shackled Caraway, he looked at Kate with pure hatred. You've ruined everything. Years of work, fortunes lost. Good, Kate said simply. Then, louder. For all to hear, let everyone know what happened here. Let them know that stealing girls has consequences. Let them know we're watching. The freed girls were wrapped in blankets, reunited with families where possible, taken into care by church women where not. Amy Jefferson clung to her father, both crying. The Platt girl stood alone until Martha Walker enforked her in a motherly embrace. 23, Morrison counted, wonder in his voice. 23 saved. 23 today, Kate corrected. How many before? How many would have come after? She looked at the ledgers Ben had retrieved, now in the marshal's custody. This ends here, all of it. As the sun reached its zenith, the camp was secured. Caraway and his remaining men were loaded into prison wagons. Evidence was catalogued. Stories were recorded. Justice, long delayed, began its slow turn. Ben found Kate standing apart from the celebration, looking out over the canyon. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but her eyes held something new. Not just satisfaction, but peace. You did it, he said, coming to stand beside her. We did it, she leaned against his shoulder. All of us, even Morrison. In the end. What now? Kate considered. Now we rebuild. Help those girls find their lives again. Make sure the trials happen, that everyone in those ledgers faces justice. She paused. And maybe we find our own life too, together. Ben wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I'd like that. As they stood there, survivors of their own wars, they watched the wagons roll away with their cargo of freed souls. The battle was won, but both knew the war against such evil never truly ended. It only paused, waiting for the next brave souls to take up the fight. Your mother would be proud, Ben said softly. Kate smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. I think she would. I think they all would. Everyone who stood up today. Behind them, the camp dissolved into motion, wounds tended, evidence gathered, hope restored. And in that moment, against all the darkness they'd faced, love and justice stood triumphant in the morning light. The gunshot echoed across the canyon like thunder, freezing everyone in place. Kate's eyes went wide as she looked down at the spreading crimson on Ben's shirt. He swayed, one hand reaching for her, the other pressed to his side. No, the word tore from her throat as she caught him, lowering him to the ground. Caraway stood 10 feet away, a derringer smoking in his hand, a hidden gun they'd missed when searching him. His white gloves were filthy now, torn and blood-stained, but his smile was triumphant, even as Marshal Hayes and 3 deputies wrestled him down. Got your savage, girl? Caraway laughed as they dragged him away. One less mongrel in the world. Kate pressed her hands against Ben's wound, blood seeping between her fingers. Martha, Martha, help! The older woman was already running, medical bag in hand. Around them, Chaos erupted anew, men shouting, horses rearing, the freed girls crying in renewed terror. But Kate saw none of it. Her world had narrowed to Ben's face, growing paler by the moment. "Stay with me," she begged. "You promised. Both of us. You said—" Ben's hand found hers, grip weak but determined. "The girls, safe." "Yes, all of them. You saved them." Tears ran down her face, mixing with the dirt and gunpowder residue. "Now let us save you." Martha knelt beside them, hands swift and sure as she cut away Ben's shirt. "Bullet's still in there. We need to get him somewhere clean, fast." "The church," Reverend Whitcomb said, appearing with a wagon. "It's closest, and we have supplies." They lifted Ben carefully, Kate refusing to let go of his hand. As the wagon rolled toward town, she kept talking about their plans, about the future they'd build, about anything that might keep him anchored to this world. "Your mother was right," she whispered. "We were meant to find each other. You can't leave now." The church became a makeshift hospital. Martha worked with steady hands while Kate assisted, having learned enough rough medicine in her months of captivity. The bullet came out in pieces, each fragment a small victory. Ben drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering in Apache when the pain grew too great. "He's lost a lot of blood," Martha said quietly as she finished stitching. "The next few hours will tell." Kate settled beside the makeshift bed, Ben's hand in both of hers. Around them, the town transformed. Word of the rescue had spread like wildfire. Families reunited with stolen daughters wept in the streets. Journalists telegraphed stories to papers across the territory. Federal marshals arrived in force, armed with the ledgers and testimonies. Through it all, Kate kept vigil. Cooper stopped by, arm in a sling, to report that Caraway was in chains, under heavy guard, awaiting transport to San Francisco for trial. Morrison came, hollow-eyed but resolute, to say he'd testified to the marshals about everything he knew. "I'll hang for my part," he said quietly. "But maybe Sarah will rest easier." "You helped save 23 girls," Kate replied. "That has to count for something." On the second night, Ben's fever broke. His eyes opened, focused and clear, finding Kate immediately. "Still here," he whispered. "Where else would I be?" She squeezed his hand, fresh tears falling. "You scared me." "Scared myself." He tried to sit up, winced, lay back. "Caraway." "In custody. The federal prosecutor says with the evidence we gathered, he'll hang for sure, along with half the territorial government. Looks like—" Ben managed a weak smile. "Your mother would be proud." "Our mothers," Kate corrected. "Both of them." As Ben recovered, the trials began. Kate testified for hours, days, her voice never wavering as she recounted horrors that made hardened marshals pale, one by one. The names in Caraway's ledgers were arrested. Judges, businessmen, politicians. The corruption ran so deep that the territorial governor himself was recalled to Washington. The girls they'd rescued were cared for, some reunited with families, others finding new homes with church families. Amy Jefferson became like a daughter to Martha Walker. The Platt girl, whose real name was Elizabeth, showed a gift for letters and was taken in by the schoolmaster. Through it all, Kate divided her time between the courthouse and Ben's bedside. They talked about everything and nothing, their pasts, their dreams, the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. "I was ready to die on that mountain," Ben admitted one evening. 5 years of hiding, of running from what I'd done. Then you knocked on my door, and everything changed. "I was already dead," Kate replied softly. "Just going through motions. You brought me back to life." When Ben was finally able to walk, they attended Caraway's execution together. The man who'd terrorized the territory for years looked small on the scaffold, white gloves replaced by shackles. He saw Kate in the crowd and tried to speak, but the words were lost as the trap door opened. "It's over," Ben said quietly. Kate shook her head. The work's not over. There are others like him, other girls who need help. We've shown it can be done. We can't stop now. That evening, in the church where Ben had nearly died, Reverend Whitcomb performed a different kind of ceremony. Kate wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Ben stood tall despite his healing wound, wearing his one good suit. The pews were packed. Cooper and his family, Martha Walker, the Hutchins clan. Morrison granted clemency for his cooperation, and many of the rescued girls. Do you, Benjamin Whitehorse, take Catherine McKenna to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Catherine McKenna, take Benjamin Whitehorse to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. As they kissed, the church erupted in cheers that could be heard across Cedar Ridge. The town that had once cowered under Caraway's shadow now celebrated love's triumph over evil. The wedding dinner was held at the hotel Caraway had once owned. Now, under new management, stories were shared, tears shed, laughter rang out. Amy Jefferson, growing stronger every day, stood to make a toast. To Kate and Ben, she said, voice clear and strong, who showed us that nobody's too broken to be saved, and that love can grow even in the darkest places. As the evening wound down, Kate and Ben slipped away to her mother's cabin. They'd decided to keep it as their home, to honor Maggie McKenna's memory, and to stay close to the town they'd helped save. Any regrets? Ben asked as they stood on the porch, looking at stars that seemed especially bright. Only one, Kate said. That Mama didn't live to see this, to know that her daughter found justice and love both. She knows, Ben said with quiet certainty. Both our mothers know. Inside, they found a wedding gift on the table, a leather journal from Reverend Whitcomb with a note, to record your continuing adventures. The work of justice is never done. Kate opened it to the first page and wrote, Today, love won. Tomorrow, we continue the fight. As they settled by the fire, planning their future, the halfway house they'd establish for rescued women, the network of allies they'd build across the territory, the children they might have one day, neither could have imagined how far their influence would spread. The McKenna Whitehorse laws would eventually reshape trafficking legislation across the expanding nation. The safe houses they established would save thousands over the years. But that was all to come. Tonight, they had each other. They had purpose. And they had love forged in darkness, but shining now like the stars above their little cabin. Thank you, Kate whispered as they lay together, finally at peace. For what? For opening your door that night. For believing a broken woman could be worth saving. Ben pulled her close, kissing her forehead. You saved yourself. I just walked beside you. Then keep walking beside me. Always. Outside, coyotes called across the mountains, not lonely now, but wild and free. The sound that had once spoken of isolation now sang of possibility, of new beginnings, of love that could transform even the harshest frontier into a place of hope. In Cedar Ridge, the transformed town slept peacefully. The warehouse where girls had been imprisoned was being torn down, its lumber to be used for a new school. The chains that had bound so many were melted down, reforged into bells for the church tower. And, in the cemetery, fresh flowers appeared daily on Maggie McKenna's grave, placed by grateful families who understood that one woman's love for her daughter had helped spark a revolution. The candle in the cabin window burned low as Kate and Ben finally slept, wrapped in each other's arms. Their scars would always remain, his from bullets and battles, hers from captivity and loss. But scars, they'd learned, were just proof of survival, maps of a journey that had led them to each other. And in the morning, they would rise together, ready to face whatever battles awaited. Because that's what love does. It makes warriors of us all. The church bells rang out across Cedar Ridge as twilight painted the sky purple and gold. Every pew was filled, every aisle crowded with people who'd come to hear the names. Reverend Whitcomb stood at the pulpit, Caraway's ledger open before him, while Kate sat in the front row between Ben and Martha Walker. Sarah Morrison, the Reverend read, his voice carrying through the hushed sanctuary. Age 14, sold June 15th. Pete Morrison, sitting 3 rows back, buried his face in his hands. His wife reached for him, their shared grief a weight that bent them both. Rebecca Stone, age 16, November 3rd. A woman's sob echoed from the back. More names followed, some drawing cries of recognition. Others met with silence from families who'd never know what became of their daughters. Each name was a stone thrown into still water, ripples of pain spreading through the congregation. Kate felt each name like a physical blow. Some she'd known in captivity. Others were strangers whose faces she'd never see. But all were sisters in suffering, and their names deserved to be spoken aloud in this place of sanctuary. Mary Catherine Phillips, age 13. Ben's hand found Kate's, anchoring her as the litany continued. 20 minutes, 30, 40 years of theft and loss reduced to entries in a madman's accounting. When Reverend Whitcomb finally closed the ledger, the silence was deafening. "Let us pray," he said softly, "for the lost, the found, and those still searching for their way home." After the service, people lingered in small groups, sharing stories and tears. Kate moved among them, offering what comfort she could. Amy Jefferson's parents thanked her again, their daughter standing tall beside them despite the shadows that still haunted her eyes. The Platt family wept over Elizabeth, promising to help her heal. Outside, Ben waited by the church steps, still moving carefully from his wound. The sunset bathed the town in warm light, softening the harsh edges of recent memory. "You all right?" he asked as Kate emerged. "Empty," she admitted, unconsciously echoing his words from the night at her mother's cabin. "I thought I'd feel, I don't know, peace, satisfaction, but all I feel is hollow." "Empty is not the end," Ben repeated his earlier wisdom. "It's the beginning, room to fill with something better." They walked slowly toward home, passing the lot where Caraway's warehouse had stood. Already, Cooper and his crew had cleared most of the rubble. A sign proclaimed the future site of the McKenna School for Girls, funded by the seized assets of those convicted from the ledgers. "Your mother's name will live on," Ben observed, "teaching girls to read, write, defend themselves. She'd like that." Kate managed a small smile. She always said education was the best protection a woman could have, that and a good hairpin. Winter softened into spring, and with it came rebirth. The rescued girls slowly reclaimed their lives. Some returned to families. Others found new paths. Amy Jefferson discovered a talent for teaching and began helping at the new school. Elizabeth Platt showed skill with numbers and found work with the bank. Each small victory was celebrated. Each setback met with patient support. Kate threw herself into the work of building the halfway house they'd planned. The old Caraway mansion, seized by the court, was transformed into a haven for women escaping dire circumstances. Ben designed and built new security measures, but these locks were meant to keep danger out, not trap anyone in. Morrison, granted clemency for his cooperation but unable to forgive himself, worked tirelessly on the construction. His wife had left him, unable to reconcile his part in their daughter's fate, but he found a kind of penance in creating safety for others. "Sarah would be 19 now," he told Kate one day, setting down his hammer. "Sometimes I dream she escaped, that she's living free somewhere under a different name." "Maybe she is," Kate said gently. "We can't know everything. We can only do better going forward." Spring bloomed into summer. The halfway house opened its doors to the first residents, 3 young women from Sacramento who'd fled a similar operation. Kate trained them in self-defense while Martha taught practical nursing. Ben showed them basic carpentry and repairs, skills that could earn honest wages. One evening, as Kate tended the vegetable garden behind their cabin, Ben approached with an odd expression. "What is it?" she asked. setting down her watering can. "Letter from Washington," he said, holding up an official-looking envelope. "The Attorney General wants to meet with us. They're drafting new federal legislation about trafficking. Want our input." Kate stared at the letter, then at him. "Us, but we're just—" "The people who exposed one of the largest trafficking rings in the Western Territories," Ben finished. "The couple whose testimony put 17 government officials in prison. Our work here has been noticed." They made the journey east in autumn, when the aspens turned gold and the air grew crisp. Washington was overwhelming after the simplicity of Cedar Ridge buildings that scraped the sky. More people in one block than in their entire town, but their purpose was clear. For 3 days, they testified before congressional committees. Kate spoke with the same unwavering clarity she'd shown during Caraway's trial, while Ben provided the tactical insights of someone who'd tracked and studied the trafficking routes. Their recommendations were practical, born from lived experience rather than theory. Make transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes a federal crime, Kate urged. Give marshals the authority to pursue traffickers anywhere. Create federal funding for rescue houses. These criminals thrive in the gaps between jurisdictions. Close those gaps. The congressmen listened, some with genuine interest, others with political calculation. But the seeds were planted. Within 2 years, the first federal anti-trafficking laws would pass, influenced heavily by what became known as the McKenna-Whitehorse Report. They returned to Cedar Ridge as the first snows began to fall, finding their town transformed but still home. The new school was thriving, the halfway house full but functioning smoothly under Martha's management. Life had found its rhythm. One night, as they sat by their fire, Kate felt the quickening in her belly that she'd been suspecting for weeks. She took Ben's hand and placed it there, watching his eyes widen with understanding. "A child," he whispered. "A new beginning," she confirmed. "Someone who'll grow up free, knowing only love and possibility." Ben pulled her close, and for the first time since that terrible night when she'd knocked on his door, Kate felt truly whole. Not empty waiting to be filled, but complete in a way that had nothing to do with what she'd lost and everything to do with what she'd found. "Boy or girl," she said, "we'll teach them to be strong, to stand up for those who can't stand for themselves, to know that love and justice are not gentle things. They're forces that can reshape the world." "Like their mother," Ben said, kissing her forehead. "Like both their parents," Kate corrected. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing Cedar Ridge in pristine white. In the halfway house, young women slept safely. In the school, books waited for eager minds. In the cemetery, flowers rested on Maggie McKenna's grave, tokens from the many lives her daughter had touched. And in the cabin where it all began, 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness planned for a future bright with purpose. The work would continue. There would always be those who preyed on the vulnerable, always be battles to fight. But tonight, there was peace. Kate rose to add wood to the fire, then returned to Ben's embrace. In a few months, there would be 3 of them in this cabin, a family forged not from perfection but from the choice to heal, to hope, to help others do the same. "Tell me again about your mother's dreams," Kate said softly. "About how she knew I was coming." Ben smiled, settling deeper into the chair with her. "She stood by a river of stars, pointing to a face I couldn't see. 'She is the one,' she said, 'the one who will change everything.' And she was right." "She was," Kate agreed, feeling their child move beneath her heart. Everything changed, and it all started with a knock on a door. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire dance, writing new chapters in the story that had begun with such pain but had transformed into something beautiful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights for justice. But tonight, in their small cabin in the mountains, love was enough. The snow continued to fall, covering the scars of the past, preparing the ground for new growth, and in Cedar Ridge, A town reborn through courage and compassion. The future waited with infinite possibility. 5 years had transformed Cedar Ridge from a town shadowed by fear into a beacon of hope across the frontier. The Autumn Harvest Festival filled Main Street with music, laughter, and the aroma of fresh-baked pies. Children ran between the booths, their joy a testament to innocence preserved rather than stolen. Kate stood beside the new schoolhouse, watching her daughter Margaret, named for the grandmother she'd never meet, chase butterflies with the other children. At 4 years old, little Maggie had her mother's green eyes and her father's quiet strength, along with a stubborn streak that came from both sides. "Mama, look!" Maggie ran up, cupping a monarch butterfly in her small hands. "Isn't it beautiful?" "It is," Kate agreed, kneeling to her daughter's level. "And see how gently you're holding it. That's how we treat all living things, with care and respect." Ben approached from the booth where he'd been demonstrating woodworking to a group of boys. His limp was barely noticeable now, the old wound just another scar in their collection. He swept Maggie up onto his shoulders as the butterfly flew away. "Papa's tall," Maggie declared, spreading her arms wide like wings. "The better to see the world from," Ben said, catching Kate's eye with a smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. The festival had drawn visitors from across the territory. Amy Jefferson, now Mrs. Amy Patterson, had come from San Francisco where she worked with a charity helping street children. Elizabeth Platt had arrived from Denver, where she'd become one of the first female bank managers in the Colorado Territory. Both women made annual pilgrimages back to Cedar Ridge, drawn by bonds forged in darkness but sustained in light. "Kate," Amy embraced her former rescuer warmly. "You look wonderful, and Maggie's grown so much." They sat together at one of the long tables, sharing news and memories. The halfway house had expanded to 3 buildings, helping over 200 women find new lives. The school served not just Cedar Ridge but 3 neighboring towns, and the work continued to spread, inspired by their example. Similar safe houses had opened across California and beyond. "Do you ever wonder," Elizabeth asked quietly, "about the ones we couldn't save the names in that ledger who were never found?" Kate's expression softened. "Every day. But Ben taught me something important. We can't carry the weight of every loss, only the purpose to prevent more." As evening approached, Reverend Whitcomb called the town together for the annual remembrance. It had become tradition, a moment to honor those lost while celebrating those saved. This year, Pete Morrison would speak for the first time. The man who'd once helped sell girls into bondage had become one of their fiercest advocates for justice. His testimony had helped convict dozens of traffickers, and he'd spent these 5 years working tirelessly for the cause. He stood before the crowd, no longer the hollow-eyed ghost of guilt, but a man who'd found redemption in service. "I can't undo what I did," Morrison said, his voice carrying across the silent square. "I can't bring back my Sarah or the others. But I can stand witness to this truth, that even the worst of us can choose to change, that even the deepest darkness can be overcome by light." He spoke of transformation, of the power of forgiveness, not just from others, but the harder task of forgiving oneself enough to keep living, keep working, keep hoping. When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. The festival continued into the night with dancing and music. Ben played his mother's Apache flute while Kate danced with Maggie, teaching her the steps her own mother had shown her years ago. Cooper's sons had formed a band, filling the air with fiddle music. Martha Walker, now in her 70s but still spry, organized the children's games with help from her adopted daughters. "Look at this," Ben said during a quiet moment, gesturing to the transformed town. "From one knock on a door in a snowstorm." Kate leaned against him, watching their daughter play with children who would never know the fears that had once stalked these streets. "Your mother's dreams were true. Everything did change." "Are you happy?" he asked, the question soft but earnest. Kate considered. Happiness had once seemed as foreign as freedom when she'd been trapped in Caraway's web. Now it came in moments like these: Maggie's laughter, Ben's steady presence, the knowledge that their work made a difference. "I'm more than happy," she said. "I'm whole." As the evening wound down, they walked home along familiar paths. Maggie rode on Ben's shoulders again, sleepily singing a song about butterflies. The cabin had been expanded over the years, extra rooms added for the children they fostered between permanent placements. Tonight, though, it was just the three of them. After Maggie was tucked into bed with a story about brave princesses who saved themselves and others, Kate and Ben sat on the porch they'd added to the front of the cabin. The view stretched across the valley to the mountains beyond, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "I got another letter from Washington," Ben said. "They want us to testify again. New legislation about protecting immigrant women at ports of entry." Kate nodded. They'd made the trip to the capital 3 times now, each visit resulting in stronger protections for vulnerable women. Their work had influence far beyond what either had imagined on that desperate winter night. "When do we leave?" "Next month. Maggie can stay with Martha." "Or we could take her," Kate suggested. "Let her see the wider world, understand the work we do. She's old enough to begin learning." Ben considered this. "You're right. She should know that making the world better isn't just something that happens. It's something people choose. Every day." A coyote called in the distance, answered by another. The sound that had once embodied loneliness now spoke of community, of voices joining across vast spaces. Kate thought of all the women they'd helped find their own voices, all the families reunited, all the predators brought to justice. 20 years ago," she said softly, "I was just a frightened girl trying to help her mother survive. I never imagined I'd become—" "A warrior," Ben suggested. "A teacher, a mother, a voice for those who have none." "A person who could love and be loved after everything," Kate finished. "That's the real miracle." Maggie called from inside, asking for water. Kate rose to tend to her, pausing to kiss Ben's forehead. "Don't stay up too late planning how to save the world. Just this corner of it," he replied, catching her hand, one life at a time. Inside, Kate found Maggie sitting up in bed, clutching the wooden doll Ben had carved for her. "Mama," the little girl said seriously, "Amy told me you saved her. Is that true?" Kate sat on the bed's edge, choosing her words carefully. "Amy saved herself by being brave. I just helped her find the way. Will you teach me to help people too? Every day, little one, every day." As Maggie drifted back to sleep, Kate returned to find Ben had moved inside, building up the fire against the evening chill. On the mantel sat their collection of memories, their wedding photo, Maggie's first drawing, letters from women they'd helped, a pressed flower from Kate's mother's garden. "What are you thinking?" Ben asked, noting her contemplative mood. "About circles," Kate said. "How Mama's love for me led me to you. How your mother's dreams led you to open that door. How all that pain transformed into purpose. How our daughter will carry that purpose forward into a world we're helping to make safer." Ben drew her close, and they stood together watching the fire dance. Outside, Cedar Ridge slept peacefully, a town reborn through courage and compassion. The halfway house sheltered new arrivals, the school prepared tomorrow's lessons, and in the cemetery, fresh flowers adorned the graves of those who'd sparked this transformation. "Do you ever wonder," Kate asked, "if all of this happened because of your mother's dream?" Ben smiled, remembering the question she'd asked years before on another quiet night. "Dreams aren't chains." He repeated his long-ago answer. "They're doors. We chose to walk through. And we're still walking," Kate added, "still choosing." Together, Ben confirmed, as they prepared for bed. Kate paused at Maggie's door, watching their daughter sleep safely in a world made better by their efforts. The fight against evil would never truly end. There would always be predators, always be vulnerable souls needing protection. But here in Cedar Ridge, in this moment, love had won. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the promise of rain for tomorrow's harvest. In the halfway house, women slept without fear. In homes throughout the valley, families once torn apart rested whole. And in a cabin built with love and strengthened by purpose, 3 souls who'd found each other against all odds dreamed of the future they'd continue building together. From the ashes of trafficking and pain had risen something beautiful. Not just a love story between 2 people, but a love for humanity itself, for justice, for the belief that no one was too broken to be healed or too lost to be found. The Wild West had tested them with its harshness, but they'd proven that even in the roughest frontier, kindness could take root and flourish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more testimony to give, more laws to shape, more women to help find freedom. But tonight, in their mountain home, the Whitehorse family rested in the peace they'd fought so hard to create, not just for themselves, but for all who would come after. The circle was complete, but the ripples continued outward, touching lives they'd never know in places they'd never see, and somewhere in the starlit sky. 2 mothers' spirits smiled, knowing their children had found each other and, in doing so, had changed the world. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. If you're enjoying these stories of love, courage, and justice from America's frontier, please let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We'd love to connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West for more authentic Western romance stories. And share your thoughts on Kate and Ben's journey. What touched your heart the most? We read every comment and love hearing how these historical tales resonate with modern audiences.